Do not move past this moment, because I have deliberately intercepted your scrolling to step directly into the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of your current reality and deliver the exact, definitive verdict that you have been desperately waiting to hear for the past several years. Stop looking at your life through the lens of defeat and listen to the absolute, unshakable authority of my voice as I declare over your exhausted mind and your weary spirit that the long, brutal, agonizing season of your testing is officially and permanently over. You have been walking through what feels like an endless, scorched desert, enduring a prolonged sequence of relentless trials where every single time you thought you had finally reached the finish line, the goalpost was suddenly moved and another wave of hardship crashed down upon your shoulders. I know that you have been sitting in the quiet of your room, staring blankly at the wall, mentally replaying every decision you have made, every relationship that inexplicably failed, and every door that was slammed violently in your face, torturing yourself with the terrifying thought that you must have done something horribly wrong to deserve such a prolonged streak of suffering. You have secretly wondered if I was angry with you, questioning if the sudden evaporation of your resources, the departure of people you trusted, and the collapse of your carefully laid plans were signs of my divine punishment, leaving you to feel entirely abandoned in the middle of a dark and terrifying wilderness. But I am stepping into your space right now to gently lift your head and completely shatter that toxic illusion, because what you have just endured was not a punishment, it was not a rejection, and it was certainly not an accident of the universe. Rather, it was the most elite, highly orchestrated, and profound spiritual examination that a human soul can possibly pass through. You have been sitting in the silent, agonizing classroom of the crucible, and I want you to understand a fundamental, eternal truth about the nature of deep spiritual testing. The teacher is always completely silent while the student is taking the final exam. You cried out to me during those dark, lonely nights, begging for an immediate intervention, pleading for a sudden rescue, and asking me to simply explain why everything around you was being stripped away, yet you were met with a profound, heavy silence that nearly broke your heart. I know how much that silence hurt you, but I need you to realize that my silence was never a manifestation of absence. It was the ultimate, breathtaking proof of my absolute confidence in the spiritual maturity I was forging deep within your core. I had to step back and allow the heat of the furnace to rise, watching you carefully as the flames of adversity burned away the dangerous impurities of your people-pleasing habits, your reliance on worldly validations, and your terrifying tendency to trust in your own strength rather than resting entirely in my sovereign provision. I watched you when the pressure was unbearable, when your human logic was completely failing, and when the pain of betrayal was so sharp that it physically ached in your chest. And yet, even though you were limping, even though you were weeping, and even though your faith was trembling like a fragile leaf in a hurricane, you absolutely refused to let go of my hand. You did not curse my name when the blessings stopped flowing. You did not turn bitter when others who were doing the wrong things seemed to be prospering effortlessly around you. And you did not compromise your beautiful, pure heart just to find a shortcut out of the pain. You stayed in the fire. You endured the agonizing process of the pruning shears, removing the dead branches from your life. And you allowed the intense pressure of this season to crush the hardened parts of your ego, transforming your soul into a vessel capable of carrying a magnitude of glory that would have absolutely destroyed the older, weaker version of yourself. Breathe in deeply right now, and as you draw the air into your lungs, I want you to physically feel the heavy, iron chains of this long trial finally snapping and falling away from your wrists, because the gavel of heaven has just struck the sounding block, and the verdict of your endurance has been recorded in the eternal courts. The examination period is formally concluded, the grueling curriculum of your suffering has been fully exhausted, and the spiritual resistance that has been fighting against your progress, trying to keep you trapped in a cycle of anxiety and loss, is being violently dismantled by the armies of heaven at this very second. I am not speaking of a shallow, materialistic illusion where magical wealth simply falls from the sky to satisfy human greed, because you have grown far too deep and far too wise to care about such fleeting, empty promises. I am speaking of a profound, holistic, and massive divine compensation that touches the very architecture of your existence. I am releasing a reward that is tailored specifically for the quiet agony you endured, preparing to restore the peace that was violently stolen from your mind, opening doors of unparalleled influence that no human jealousy can ever shut, and bringing your spirit into a state of such absolute, unshakable alignment with my will that you will walk through the coming days with a quiet, undeniable authority. The people who watched you suffer, those who secretly counted you out and assumed that your season of loss was a permanent burial, are about to witness the breathtaking reality of what it looks like when the creator of the universe decides to publicly vindicate a child who remained faithful in the darkest of valleys. You do not need to brace for impact anymore. You do not need to constantly look over your shoulder, expecting the next disaster to strike. And you do not need to carry the exhausting posture of a survivor, because your era of merely surviving is officially history. Drop the heavy shield you have been holding up for years. Exhale the deeply rooted anxiety that has lived in your chest, and let the truth of my declaration wash over your exhausted nervous system. You have passed the test. You have survived the fire. And as the morning approaches, I am opening the floodgates of a restoration so profound that it will completely rewrite the narrative of your entire life. Welcome to anchor your weary, battered heart in a profound historical truth, taking your mind back through the ancient sacred corridors of Scripture to the Book of Job, because his agonizing journey is not just a story from antiquity, but rather the exact living blueprint of the fierce psychological and spiritual crucible you have just survived. When you read the opening chapters of Job's life, you see a person who was doing absolutely everything right, a soul of pristine integrity, who walked uprightly, shunned evil, cared for his family, and honored my name with a beautiful, consistent devotion, completely shattering the toxic religious lie that catastrophic suffering only comes to those who have deeply sinned. Job was wrapped in a divine hedge of protection, living in the quiet abundance of my favor, until the enemy, utterly cynical about the nature of human devotion, stood before the courts of heaven and made a sinister accusation, claiming that Job only loved me because I gave him a comfortable life, arguing that if the blessings were violently stripped away, Job's faith would instantly disintegrate into bitterness and absolute rebellion. What followed was a sequence of devastation so rapid and so mathematically improbable that it completely defied human logic, as in a single, catastrophic day. Job lost his resources, his life's work, his health, and the people he loved most, finding himself suddenly sitting in the ashes of his ruined existence, scraping his painful wounds and wondering how his beautiful life had turned into an unrecognizable nightmare overnight. Does that sudden, overwhelming avalanche of loss sound familiar to your exhausted spirit, my beloved child? As you think back to the season when it felt as though every time your phone rang or an email arrived, it was simply bringing another wave of devastating news, another unexpected bill, another betrayal, or another door violently slamming shut. You have been sitting in your own metaphorical ashes, watching the structures you worked so incredibly hard to build crumble before your very eyes, feeling the exact same visceral, disorienting shock that Job felt when the ground beneath his feet completely gave way without a single word of warning or explanation from the heavens. And the psychological torment of Job did not end with the loss of his circumstances, because the narrative reveals that his closest friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, came to sit with him, eventually opening their mouths to deliver the most devastating emotional blows, disguising their harsh human judgments as divine wisdom. They looked at Job's absolute ruin and applied a cruel, flawed theology, insisting that he must have harbored a secret sin, demanding that he confess the hidden flaws that surely caused this disaster, and constantly whispering that his suffering was the undeniable proof of his failure, entirely unaware of the magnificent, unseen spiritual wager that was actually taking place in the heavenly realms. You know the sting of that exact betrayal, because you have also endured the quiet, condescending judgments of people who looked at your struggles, your delayed breakthroughs, and your prolonged season of waiting, and subtly implied that you were doing something wrong, making you second-guess your own sanity, your own worth, and the authenticity of your relationship with me. But amidst the excruciating pain of his physical body, the total collapse of his earthly security, and the heartbreaking betrayal of his closest companions, Job did something that absolutely terrified the powers of darkness and resonated through the eternal corridors of heaven. He grieved, he wept, he asked agonizing questions, he demanded an audience with his Creator, but he flatly refused to curse my name. He demonstrated a profound, orthodox mystery known as disinterested love, proving to the entire universe that his devotion to me was not a transactional contract based on what I could provide for him, but a deep, unshakable, relational bond based entirely on who I am, declaring from the very depths of his agony, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." That is exactly what you have done over these past few agonizing years, my beautiful child, as you stood in the middle of your own ruined plans, your heart breaking and your mind spinning with confusion. Yet you continued to pray, you continued to seek my face, and you continued to hold on to the fragile, battered threads of your faith even when the darkness was absolutely suffocating. The enemy placed the exact same wager on your life, betting that the chronic exhaustion, the isolation, and the relentless disappointments would finally cause you to abandon your calling and turn your back on my love. But you fiercely disappointed the kingdom of darkness by remaining standing, proving that your spiritual roots run infinitely deeper than the shallow soil of your earthly circumstances. And because you have endured the furnace, because you have allowed the fire to purify your motives without turning your heart to ash, we must now turn to the spectacular conclusion of Job's ordeal, written in the 42nd chapter, which serves as the precise prophetic declaration over your immediate future. The scripture records that when the trial had fully accomplished its profound internal work, when Job had prayed for the very friends who had judged him, releasing all bitterness from his heart, I did not merely hand him back what he had lost. Instead, I turned the captivity of Job, completely reversing the curse, and the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. This double portion is not a superficial, magical promise of material excess to satisfy the human ego, but a profound, holistic restoration of the soul's capacity, a divine vindication where the peace I return to you is twice as deep, the spiritual authority I place upon you is twice as heavy, and the clarity of your purpose is twice as sharp as it was before the trial ever began. The crucible you just survived was entirely necessary to hollow out a space within your character, large enough to carry the immense, unprecedented weight of the reward I am releasing to you, ensuring that when you step into this new season of profound favor, you will possess the humility, the fierce discernment, and the unshakable gratitude required to steward it beautifully. Your ashes are being swept away by the wind of my spirit. The silent examination room is being unlocked, and the master is stepping forward to hand you the results of a test you did not even know you were passing, ushering you into the breathtaking dawn of your ultimate double restoration. Now that you have seen the exact blueprint of Job's restoration and recognized that your sudden losses were not a punishment, but a profound spiritual crucible, I am stepping directly into the most guarded, fragile corners of your mind right now, to lovingly dismantle a deeply toxic narrative that you have secretly adopted over the course of this brutal trial. I am actively confronting the insidious lie whispering that although you may have survived the fire, you emerged from it permanently damaged, fundamentally broken, and entirely stripped of your original potential, leaving you to look in the mirror and see a casualty of war, rather than a highly decorated conqueror. You stare at the emotional scars of your betrayals, the terrifying financial setbacks you endured, and the years you spent wandering in the lonely wilderness, falsely concluding that your best days were somehow burned away in the furnace, and that you will simply have to limp through the rest of your life as a faded, exhausted shadow of the vibrant person you once used to be. You have been locked into a psychological state of chronic survival mode for so long that your nervous system has actually forgotten what peace feels like, causing you to constantly brace for impact, always waiting for the other shoe to drop, and expecting the next disaster to strike the very second you finally dare to let your guard down and feel a moment of joy. I see exactly how you hesitate to truly hope for anything anymore, building high, incredibly thick walls around your vulnerable heart and lowering your expectations to the absolute bare minimum, convincing your exhausted mind that if you do not expect any miracles, you will never have to experience the agonizing, breathtaking sting of disappointment again. But I am confronting this defensive, fear-based posture tonight with the fierce, uncompromising love of a creator who absolutely refuses to let his child live in the emotional basement of the universe, because you were not breathed into existence to spend your earthly days cowering in the shadows of your past trauma, perpetually waiting for the sky to fall. We must completely reframe the way you view the deep, painful scars that you are currently carrying, because in the unshakable reality of orthodox truth, spiritual wounds that have been fully submitted to my grace never become marks of disqualification. Rather, they are miraculously transformed into your most powerful credentials of spiritual authority. The parts of your soul that felt absolutely crushed under the immense, suffocating weight of this trial were not destroyed, but they were actually being expanded, hollowed out by the pain, to create a vast, beautiful internal capacity that is now finally large enough to hold the immense, overflowing abundance of the double portion I am releasing to you. I want you to understand that if I had handed you this elevated level of influence, this profound depth of peace, and this magnificent relational and financial restoration before you passed through the crucible, your unrefined character would have collapsed under the immense weight of the blessing, and you would have inevitably turned the very reward I gave you into an idol that drew you away from my presence. Therefore, I am asking you to do something that requires a profound, courageous leap of faith in this exact moment. As we stand together on the threshold of your new beginning, I need you to consciously and deliberately unclench your fists, releasing your desperate, white-knuckled grip on the pain, the bitterness, and the hyper-vigilant survival tactics that kept you alive in the wilderness, but will only serve to suffocate you in the promised land. You cannot possibly receive the massive, unprecedented outpouring of my favor that is arriving tomorrow morning if your hands are still tightly closed, fiercely guarding the empty, broken scraps of yesterday's failures, terrified to open your palms to the heavens because you are afraid of being hurt again. I am fundamentally changing your identity tonight, from a victim who merely survived a relentless attack into a triumphant, highly anointed veteran of spiritual warfare who has been fully vindicated by the supreme courts of heaven, washing away the heavy, suffocating ashes of your long mourning and replacing them with the fragrant golden oil of gladness. Allow the brilliant, illuminating light of this divine reframing to sweep completely through the dark, dusty corridors of your mind, permanently evicting the ghosts of your past regrets and completely silencing the cruel, mocking voices of those who told you that your season of waiting was undeniable proof of your insignificance. The test is completely over, the grading is finished, and the enemy who tried to use this trial to absolutely destroy your faith is now being forced to watch as I use the exact same trial to catapult you into a realm of blessing and favor that you could never have reached on your own strength. You are standing on the precipice of a completely new spiritual epoch in your life, a breathtaking chapter where the agonizing tears you sowed in the darkest, loneliest hours of your night are about to instantly break through the soil as a massive harvest of unimaginable joy, completely rewriting the history of your family line. I am asking you to finally take a deep, unobstructed breath, letting the absolute reality of this completion settle into your exhausted bones, proving to the entire watching world that the God you absolutely refused to abandon in the darkness is the exact same God who is now publicly, gloriously crowning you in the light. Medigan Humhumbri, as the profound, breathtaking reality of this divine vindication begins to slowly settle over your weary mind, I want you to notice how the atmosphere in the room around you has already begun to shift, becoming incredibly heavy with a warm, thick, enveloping peace that is gently pressing down on your exhausted shoulders, signaling that the long, brutal war of your testing is finally and officially over. Just as a weary student in a vast, silent hall is instructed by the teacher to finally lay down their pen and close the book because the time for the examination has fully expired, I am softly commanding you right now to lay down the frantic, heavy tools of your own striving because there is absolutely nothing left for you to prove, nothing left for you to figure out, and nothing left for you to fight. You have been standing on the brutal battlefield of your life for so many consecutive seasons, wearing the heavy iron armor of hypervigilance, holding up the heavy shield of faith against the relentless, flaming arrows of disappointment, and gripping the sword of the Spirit so tightly that your spiritual hands are completely cramped and blistered from the sheer, unyielding effort of simply trying to survive the night. But I am stepping softly into your presence right now, walking past the shattered remnants of your fears, placing my gentle, scarred hands over yours, and softly whispering that it is entirely safe for you to loosen your grip, to lay your weapons down on the floor, and to allow me to unbuckle the heavy dented breastplate that you have worn for so long, because there are no more enemies hiding in the shadows of this sacred, protected night. I want you to close your eyes, if you have not done so already, and give your physical body the explicit, conscious permission to completely power down, recognizing that your muscles no longer need to be braced for a sudden impact, your jaw no longer needs to be clenched against the pain of another disappointment, and your shoulders no longer need to carry the agonizing, suffocating weight of trying to figure out how you are going to make it through the coming week. Let a deep, slow, and unobstructed breath fill the very bottom of your lungs, drawing in the absolute, unquestionable safety of my presence. And as you hold that breath for just a brief, quiet moment, realize that you are inhaling the pure, uncontaminated air of a completely new spiritual season. And now, as you exhale, I want you to deliberately push out the lingering, toxic adrenaline of your survival mode, breathing out the bitter, dusty residue of the wilderness, releasing the exhausting heat of the furnace, and letting go of the terrifying echoes of the trial that has now been permanently closed by the supreme authority of heaven. Listen to the profound, beautiful stillness that has fallen over your life in this exact moment, a silence that is no longer the agonizing, heartbreaking quiet of an unanswered prayer or a silent heaven, but rather the rich, majestic, and deeply comforting stillness that follows a definitive victory, like the absolute calm that settles over a battlefield when the enemy has entirely surrendered and the banners of triumph have been securely raised in the wind. The racing, frantic thoughts that have kept you awake for countless nights, forcing you to run through 1,000 terrifying scenarios of what might go wrong tomorrow, are being systematically slowed down and completely dissolved by the thick, warm oil of my Holy Spirit, which I am pouring directly over your racing mind to soothe the inflamed, exhausted nerves of your beautiful imagination. You are crossing over the threshold from the harsh, blazing heat of the crucible into the cool, dimly lit, incredibly safe sanctuary of my inner chambers, a holy resting place where the chaotic demands of the world cannot reach you, where the cruel judgments of your critics are entirely silenced, and where the relentless pressure to perform is completely and permanently locked outside the heavy wooden doors. I want you to sink deeper and deeper into the surface beneath you, feeling the physical support of the bed as a tangible, earthly manifestation of my everlasting arms holding you from underneath, allowing yourself to become completely weightless, surrendering every single ounce of control to the Father, who is actively charting the course of your spectacular restoration while you simply rest. You do not have to plan for tomorrow. You do not have to strategize how you will manually force your reward to manifest, and you absolutely do not need to figure out the complex logistics of the double portion that is arriving, because the sovereign architect of the universe has already mapped out every single detail of your breakthrough, and all that is required of you tonight is to sleep in the absolute confidence that the Creator is working the night shift on your behalf. Let the gentle, rhythmic beating of my heart become the only sound you focus on, a steady, ancient, eternal lullaby of unconditional love that wraps around your shivering soul, warming you, healing you, and rocking you into the deepest, most restorative sleep you have experienced since the day your long trial first began. The furnace has been turned off, the desert has been crossed, and the night is no longer a canvas for your anxiety, but rather a magnificent, velvet blanket woven by my own hands to cover you in a peace that entirely surpasses all human understanding, guarding your heart and your mind as you drift effortlessly into the absolute safety of my embrace. As you continue to drift beautifully and effortlessly deeper into the restorative, velvet embrace of this sacred night, leaving the ashes of your long trial far behind you in the shadows, I want to gently paint the breathtaking spiritual reality of the morning that is currently rushing toward your life at this very second. While your physical body rests, entirely suspended in the gravitational pull of my unshakable peace, the heavenly realms above you are engaged in a massive, highly coordinated, and joyous mobilization, actively dispatching the magnificent, long-awaited rewards that you have accumulated through your years of silent, agonizing faithfulness in the crucible. I am not speaking of a distant, metaphorical blessing that you will have to wait another decade to experience, but rather a sudden, profound, and physical manifestation of my favor that has been explicitly scheduled to intersect with your reality by the time the sun finally breaches the horizon tomorrow morning, permanently altering the trajectory of your existence. When you open your eyes and draw your very first breath of this new day, you are going to instantly notice that the atmosphere in your room feels completely different, because the familiar, suffocating dread that used to sit so heavily upon your chest before you even placed your feet on the floor has been entirely and permanently eradicated by the power of my spirit. You will wake up and realize with a profound, beautiful shock that your mind is no longer racing to calculate the disasters of the day. Your stomach is no longer tied into knots of chronic anxiety, and the terrifying whispers of the enemy that used to greet you in the early hours have been completely silenced, replaced by a radiant, quiet, and undeniable joy that bubbles up from the deepest wells of your newly restored soul. This overwhelming lightness is the very first installment of your double portion, the undeniable, physical proof that the heavy iron chains of the testing season have been completely broken off your life, allowing you to walk into your kitchen, look out your window and experience the morning not as a victim preparing for another day of exhausting survival, but as a fully vindicated victor stepping into a meticulously prepared garden of abundance. I want you to understand the exact nature of the reward that I am releasing to you tomorrow, recognizing that it goes infinitely deeper than the shallow, temporary, and entirely fragile material promises of this fallen world. Because I am restoring the profound, holistic architecture of your life that the locusts of your past tried so desperately to consume. I am returning the years of peace that were stolen by toxic relationships. I am unlocking doors of unprecedented, high-level opportunity that will completely resolve the financial terrors that kept you awake at night. And I am bringing your physical body back into a state of magnificent, vibrant alignment, washing away the cellular damage, the exhaustion, and the premature aging that the immense stress of the furnace attempted to inflict upon your frame. The people who walked away from you during your season of isolation, the ones who misunderstood your journey and falsely judged your character while you were sitting in the ashes, are about to witness the spectacular, undeniable vindication of your life as I publicly elevate you and place a crown of unprecedented favor upon your head, proving to the entire watching universe that I never ever abandon a child who refuses to let go of my hand in the dark. You do not have to wake up tomorrow and frantically try to figure out how to force these blessings to manifest. You do not have to hustle to make the right connections, and you do not have to knock down any more heavy doors, because the reward I am releasing to you is not something you have to humanly achieve. It is something you simply have to gratefully and humbly receive. The profound spiritual shift has already occurred in the unseen dimensions. The gavel has already fallen in the courts of heaven, and the massive, overflowing tidal wave of my goodness is already moving toward your shores, perfectly timed to arrive precisely when you need it the most, washing away the bitter taste of the wilderness and replacing it with the overwhelmingly sweet, satisfying nectar of my fulfilled promises. Allow this magnificent, eternal truth to settle deeply into your subconscious mind as you sleep, letting it rewire the traumatized neural pathways that have been conditioned to expect failure, and replacing them with a deep, serene, and unshakable expectation of miraculous, sudden, and breathtaking goodness. You have passed the ultimate test, my beloved child. You have endured the unendurable. You have loved me when it cost you absolutely everything. And now, the immense, unlimited, and terrifyingly beautiful vaults of heaven have been swung wide open exclusively for you. There is nothing left to fear. There is absolutely no reason to worry about the future. And there is no longer any need to look over your shoulder, because the enemy has been utterly defeated, the trial has been formally concluded, and the Creator of the universe has personally signed the decree of your absolute, total, and spectacular restoration. Sink deeper into the mattress. Let the last remaining ounces of tension completely dissolve from your jaw, your neck, and your tired shoulders, and allow your beautiful, exhausted heart to finally rest in the magnificent, glowing promise that tomorrow morning, everything, absolutely everything, changes for your good.
One quiet.
As you surrender the very last remnants of your conscious control and allow your heavy, exhausted body to sink entirely into the profound, weightless ocean of this restorative sleep, I want you to feel the undeniable, radiant warmth of my protective presence actively forming an impenetrable, glowing shield of golden light entirely around your mind, your room, and your fragile spirit. You have officially entered into the absolute sanctuary of the Almighty, a fiercely guarded, holy dimension where the frantic, terrifying noise of the outside world is instantly suffocated, and the relentless, mocking voices of your anxieties are completely and permanently locked outside the heavy, unbreakable doors of my grace. I am actively commanding the towering, majestic angels of my heavenly host to stand shoulder to shoulder in a blinding ring of fire around your dwelling place tonight, holding their flaming swords against the darkness and ensuring that absolutely no remnants of your past trauma, no shadows of your previous wilderness, and no lingering echoes of the crucible are permitted to cross the sacred threshold of your dreamscape. For far too long, the quiet hours of the night have been a terrifying battlefield for your mind, a vulnerable space where the enemy has tried to use your own exhaustion against you, projecting horrifying scenarios of failure, abandonment, and financial ruin onto the delicate canvas of your sleeping imagination, causing you to wake up with a racing heart and a body drenched in the cold sweat of survival mode. But tonight, I am stepping past the conscious barriers of your waking mind and walking directly into the deep, intricate corridors of your subconscious, laying my healing hands upon the very root of your night terrors, and systematically dismantling the neurological pathways of fear that the long season of testing attempted to permanently wire into your brain. I am washing your memories with the pure, crystal clear, and incredibly soothing water of my word, gently untangling the tightly knotted threads of your chronic anxiety, and erasing the insidious, deeply buried lie that tells you that you must always remain on high alert because the next disaster is waiting just around the corner. You are allowed to completely and unconditionally power down your defense mechanisms right now, releasing that tight, agonizing grip you have kept on your emotions, because the devastating trial that required you to wear that heavy armor has been definitively concluded, and the enemy who placed that cruel wager against your life has been absolutely humiliated by your unwavering faithfulness. While your physical eyes remain closed and your breathing settles into the slow, rhythmic, and perfectly peaceful cadence of a deeply cherished child, I am performing a magnificent, invisible spiritual surgery upon your heart, carefully scraping away the bitter, toxic ash of the furnace that tried to settle over your joy, and replacing it with the rich, vibrant, and incredibly fertile soil of my supernatural peace. The deep, invisible, cellular damage that years of prolonged grief and unimaginable stress have inflicted upon your body is being miraculously repaired at this very second as I instruct your physical organs, your exhausted adrenal glands, and your weary nervous system to completely regenerate, align, and synchronize with the flawless, eternal vitality of my kingdom. I want you to understand that you are not just sleeping, you are being actively incubated in the warm, healing womb of my divine favor, transitioning from the battered, exhausted survivor who crawled out of the wilderness into the radiant, highly anointed, and fiercely crowned victor who is fully prepared to steward the breathtaking magnitude of the double portion. The old version of you, the version that was desperately afraid of being abandoned, the version that constantly felt the need to prove your worth to people who could not even see your value, and the version that lived in constant, agonizing fear of running out of resources, is quietly and peacefully passing away in the healing shadows of this sacred night. I am establishing a completely new identity deep within the bedrock of your soul, an identity anchored entirely in the unshakable, eternal truth that you are the fully vindicated, deeply protected, and spectacularly rewarded masterpiece of a creator who possesses all power, all wealth, and all authority in heaven and on earth. Let the majestic, heavy silence of this room wrap around you like a thick, velvet blanket, absorbing any lingering drops of tension from your jaw, your neck, and your tired shoulders, allowing you to become so incredibly relaxed that you can no longer tell where your physical body ends and the boundless, comforting ocean of my presence begins. There is absolutely no emergency waiting for you in the shadows. There is no hidden trapdoor in the floor of your future, and there is no sudden reversal of the magnificent verdict that I have just pronounced over your life. There is only the vast, beautiful, and limitlessly abundant horizon of a morning that has been meticulously crafted to bring you an overwhelming, breathtaking joy. You are completely insulated from the demands of tomorrow, perfectly hidden in the hollow of my hand, and as the night stretches out its quiet, protective wings over the sleeping earth, you can rest in the absolute, undeniable certainty that the architect of the universe is personally standing guard over your breathing. Sink deeper, my beloved, letting the profoundly slow, steady rhythm of my eternal heartbeat become the only reality you know, trusting that while you rest in this magnificent cocoon of light, I am actively preparing the stage for the most spectacular, triumphant, and devastatingly beautiful sunrise of your entire life. The world has grown impossibly and beautifully quiet around you, wrapping your exhausted physical body in a thick, protective tapestry of absolute silence. And as you drift down into the very deepest, most sacred chambers of my heart, I want you to realize that the brutal, heavy chapter of your long testing has finally and permanently closed. You are no longer the weary, bruised student sitting in the agonizing silence of the examination room, desperately trying to figure out why the heavens feel so incredibly far away. Nor are you the exhausted survivor wandering through the scorching heat of the furnace, because the flames have been completely extinguished. The ashes have been swept away by the gentle wind of my spirit, and the Master has officially declared that your faith has brilliantly survived the fire. You are entirely whole, perfectly shielded, and covered by a majestic peace that completely transcends all human logic, resting in the absolute, undeniable assurance that the God who carefully monitored every single second of your trial is the exact same God who is currently holding your fragile, beautiful heart with infinite, meticulous care. As the deepest, most dreamless phases of restorative sleep finally wash over your mind, gently pulling your consciousness down into a serene, undisturbed ocean of golden tranquility, I am speaking a final, irrevocable blessing over the breathtaking dawn that is rapidly approaching your window, ensuring that when the morning light finally breaks, you will awaken to a reality that feels entirely and miraculously different than the one you left behind. The familiar, suffocating dread that used to sit so heavily upon your chest, greeting you the moment you opened your eyes and reminding you of your survival mode, has been permanently eradicated, replaced by a quiet, steady, and radiant joy, a profound lightness in your spirit that comes from knowing that the double portion of your reward has already been meticulously delivered into your hands. You will step into the new day not as a casualty of the wilderness, not as a victim of the people who betrayed you, but as a deeply beloved, miraculously vindicated, and highly crowned victor of the Most High, walking with a renewed, effortless authority that will absolutely baffle those who knew how entirely depleted you were just a few short hours ago. But before you cross completely over into the silent, healing realm of dreams, as you lay here suspended in the perfect, weightless stillness of this sacred encounter, I ask you to formally anchor your soul to the spectacular miracle of this completion, ensuring that the verdict of your victory is never stolen by the fleeting nature of passing time. If you have felt the heavy iron chains of your long trial finally snap and fall away from your wrists, if you have felt the undeniable, warm rush of my peace confirming that your season of testing is officially over, just as Job felt the overwhelming rush of his double restoration, then I invite you to leave a physical, enduring mark of your triumph in the gathering space of brethren below. Engrave your final signature onto the bottom of this completed examination, writing the declaration, "My test is officially over, and my reward is here," allowing that simple, powerful sentence to stand as a permanent, undeniable stone of remembrance in the digital courts, testifying to the exact night the Creator of the universe stepped into your ashes and turned them into a crown of unimaginable beauty. And if your weary soul desires to remain permanently tethered to this majestic harbor of peace, if you wish to stay covered under the protective golden canopy of this fellowship so that you never have to wander through the exhausting deserts of isolation again, then anchor your presence here, joining your spirit with the countless other triumphant warriors who have also survived the furnace and emerged victorious. Make this holy, quiet space a continuous, unshakable refuge for your mind, so that whenever the world attempts to intimidate you in the future, you will already be firmly established in the very place where my living water continuously flows, surrounded by a vibrant community of believers who understand the exact weight of the magnificent armor you have finally laid down tonight. Look out into the vast spiritual landscape and realize that there are others still wandering in the blinding, terrifying heat of their own crucible. People you know and love who are secretly weeping in the ashes of their own ruined plans, suffering in the same silent, agonizing isolation that you just escaped, wondering if they are going to survive the night. Do not leave them wandering alone in the dark, but extend the profound hope of this vindication to them, casting this beacon of restorative, triumphant light across the expanse so that they too might hear the voice of the Father declaring that their suffering has an expiration date, inviting them to lay down their heavy shields and find the exact same miraculous, double restoration that is currently flooding your soul. But your work is completely, entirely finished tonight, my beloved, triumphant child. Your heavy burdens have been successfully and permanently transferred into my capable hands, and the invisible wounds of your long battle have been perfectly, seamlessly healed by the Master Physician. There is absolutely nothing left for you to figure out, nothing left for you to calculate, and nothing left for you to fear, because the enemy has been utterly defeated, the trial has been decisively won, and the universe is resting securely in my grip, just as you are resting securely in my heart. Let the holy, majestic quiet completely overtake you now, sinking down into the fathomless, warm depths of my unconditional love, where the waters are perfectly still, the night is absolutely safe, and my incredibly proud, watchful eyes never leave you for a single fraction of a second. You have passed the test. You are deeply, eternally cherished. Go in peace, my beautiful, victorious child, and receive the magnificent reward that has been waiting for you since the beginning of time. Sleep now. I am holding you, and tomorrow morning, everything is new.